Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. I've got the latest from High Point, the YC9, and this is the YEET Cannon version. They do call it the YEET Cannon, but this one actually has the roll mark. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. This is the Gen 2 and is chambered in 9mm. And like I said, there's a version of it that doesn't have this roll mark here, but I figured why not? I might as well get the roll mark. And it was named via an internet poll. So when High Point came out with this, they put out an internet poll, and that's what everybody wanted to call it. I don't think High Point was enthused by that name, but they went with it because they'd put the poll out there. The actual model number is YC9, which goes, of course, with the YEET Cannon name. The original one, which is sitting right here, was the C9, and this was around for a very long time. So if you were asking about a High Point, this is what you would get. There was minimal serrations on the back, and they tended to be very slippery. They were relatively difficult to use unless you had strong hands to get a hold of it and get it all the way back. These are straight blowback. They're heavy. So this new one here weighs 34.2 ounces, which by today's standards for 9mm is fairly heavy. But again, straight blowback, that's what you're going to get. They had these kind of contoured grips, but they were a little bit slick and a little bit puffy. The trigger on these are okay. They really haven't done much with the trigger. They've probably improved it a little bit. It's probably a little more refined, but overall these triggers are not spectacular. But one of the claims to fame with High Points is they just work. They're inexpensive handguns that work, that don't require a lot of tender loving care. You can store them in a truck or a boat or a toolbox or a tackle box, and unlike a nice 1911 where you're going to have to give it some loving or it's going to not work, these things will put up with that kind of nonsense. So the original one, then the next one came out. They had announced the YEET Cannon, but all they had done is taken the original Gen 1 and put some roll marks on it. Then they came out with the JXP10, which I've got one of these, and you notice you're starting to see a little bit more ergonomics. You've got front and rear serrations, a Picatinny rail, which the previous one didn't have, threaded barrel, and different grips. The grips were always interchangeable, but they're a little bit more ergonomic, and these wood grips are grips I put on it. It came with black grips, but they just kind of redesigned it. And this is a 10mm pistol, and it actually worked well. And I added this red dot to it. The later editions are optics ready, and it's easier to get a hold of the slide on this and easier to cycle it. And the finish is just a little bit different. It's still a powder coat, but it's a little bit different, so it actually adds a little bit of traction. Now, I say optics ready. If I pick this one up here, you'll see it's got an adjustable rear sight. You take these two bolts out, and there's a plate you put in. There's two different varieties. One puts a Picatinny rail on there. That's what I did for this one, and you can use any red dot that'll mount on a Picatinny rail. And we've got a video. I'll put a link to this video where we kind of make this one a little more interesting with the grips and the red dot, but we did it to a budget. We didn't spend $200-300 on a red dot, obviously, for a $200 pistol. You can also get a version of this that's just a flat plate for specific red dots, like the RMSC, the Shield, the Crimson Trace format. So they got two varieties now that you replace this rear sight with. Now let me pop this out, demonstrate that this guy is unloaded. One thing that you notice is the slide's a lot lighter. So I'm going to cycle the slide on this one, and you see how easy it is to do. I'm going to pull the original 9mm out, which has no magazine. And it's a little bit heavier and just a little bit hitchier, and there's not as much to get a hold of. So depending on your hand strength, you may find that the new one is much easier to manipulate and cycle. Trigger's roughly the same. The grips are a little bit different. They're a little bit flatter. They've got more texture on them. Overall, I mean, from end to end, there's more texture on them. I mentioned the threaded barrel. But the big claim to fame is they come with these kind of single stack to double stack magazines, and they hold 10 rounds. Now, by today's standards, we just did a video a week or so ago, but a Hellcat, which is a micro compact that holds 11 rounds in its flush mag and goes up to 17, so it's not huge, but it is definitely more capacity than the 7 rounds that the original one held. The magazine goes in. Now I did notice I kind of had hit the magazine. In fact, you heard it just click there. You kind of have to hit the magazine to get it to seat. Didn't have that problem with the other one. That is one of the things that surprised me about this. I don't pick on high points. They've got a purpose and they generally serve that purpose. Again, I mentioned inexpensive, reliable handguns. This one was reasonably inexpensive. The MSRP on this one was $236. You can get it for MSRP is $229 if you don't have the roll mark on it. But this one actually was a little bit temperamental. It had a habit of failing to feed and not cycling correctly. And that's unusual for high points. For all the things that people want to say nasty about high points, they do generally work. This one is a little bit temperamental. Now I'm willing to give guns a break-in period, and that would apply to the high point. My only concern with a break-in period on high point is if you've got a high point budget, you're probably not looking to spend a lot of money with range fees and lots of ammo to get the gun functional. You pretty much need it to just work. So my expectation would be a little bit higher on something like this to just work out of the box. Not be fancy, but at least work. So I did run some MagTech ammo through it that's a little bit hotter than the Federal, and it did cycle that correctly. So I think a few times at the range cycling it, it'll break in a little bit and hopefully would be reliable with just whatever ammo that you've got. Because again, most likely you're not buying fancy ammo for this, even though it is plus P rated. You're probably buying whatever is at the range. When you go into, pay for your range session, whatever they got behind the counter is what you're going to get, and you probably are expecting it to just work. Ergonomically, they're okay. They're decent looking. They're blocky, but again, it's a big, heavy blowback gun, so they are going to be blocky. But the serrations are on both sides. There are no ambi features. The magazine release is on one side, and it works acceptably. It's kind of a little bit difficult to get it to work reliably, but it does work. And the sights are decent. So it's got a yellow front sight, kind of a bright, easy to see, and red rear sight. The rear sight is drift adjustable. The rear sight's actually fully adjustable. So there's an adjustment screw for windage and an adjustment screw for height. And that's unusual in inexpensive handguns, but all the high points have tended to come like that with the fully adjustable sights. So it has a thumb safety. It also has a magazine disconnect. Not a fan of those, but all the high points have them. But with the YC9, they've added this safety. And this is going to be controversial. People love or hate these things. So like the Springfields have them, and you'll hear a lot of people say they hate them. Even on the Springfields, they work every time. I didn't have any problem with this safety either biting into me or not doing the job. When I grab a hold of it, it moves out of the way and allows the gun to fire correctly. So I didn't have any problem with this. But this grip safety will be probably a contentious thing. Some people may not like it. And the interesting thing is they didn't have it on the original one. And when they came out with the JXP10, which is the 10mm version, they don't have it there either. So why they chose to put it in the YC9, I'm really not sure. And that actually may kind of drive some people away because they don't like them. You do see them on 1911s, but it seems to be 1911 is the only place where people really allow them to exist. I mentioned the threaded barrel. It's a 1/28. There's also a non-threaded version you can get that would be useful in states that don't allow threaded barrels, where they consider that to be too tactical. Also, you can get this Crimson Trace red dot already installed on it. So if you're wanting to kind of, just out of the box with the red dot ready to go, I think the MSRP on that one is about $325. Now, taking these down, I'm not going to actually take it down because they're actually very cumbersome to do. There's a roll pin right there you have to punch out, and then the whole thing comes apart. But it's very time consuming to take one of these things apart and kind of clunky, so I don't want to make this video super long doing that. But they haven't changed that. So the takedown procedure on this is the same as any other high point that's out there. They're designed not to require a whole lot of cleaning and a whole lot of maintenance, but when you do have to take them apart, they're clunky to do it. It requires a tool, punch the pin out. You do have to take the thread protector off, even though if you look at it, you might be inclined to think, that it would fit through, but it won't. There's another ledge inside there and it won't fit through. Now one thing I will mention, and I'm going to show you on the barrel, the barrel is actually quite well machined. Of course, they are a machine shop, so you would kind of expect that. But the rifling is very defined, very crisp. It's a well-machined barrel. And the one thing I did notice internally is the overall machining of it was better. It was smoother. There was fewer chatter marks, fewer various difficulties with the machining. So they've kind of improved their machining process a little bit on these. So I'm going to demonstrate the trigger, and this is going to be clunky. It's got a magazine disconnect, so I just cycled it so the trigger is ready to go. I'll have to put the magazine in, then I can, a little bit of take up, kind of a stiff, relatively short break, and then there's quite a bit of over travel because you notice it kept going. Now I'm going to have to pop the magazine, cycle it, put the magazine back in. There's the reset. It's kind of vague, but it's all the way out. And then the break again. The trigger is a little bit better than the original triggers, but it's not anywhere in the territory of like a nice Walther trigger. But it's functional. The trigger does its job, and it's relatively consistent, which probably is more important than being a great trigger, is being a relatively consistent trigger so that you get used to it and you learn how to use it and it works the same every time. Dimensionally, I didn't mention this earlier, I did mention the weight. It's 7.6 inches front to back, it's 5.9 inches tall, and it's relatively thick at 1.40 inches. So there's nothing small or light about this, but again, that's not what they claim to be, that's not what they brag to be, that's not what they're designed to be. The only thing I hope on this one is that it steps up its game in reliability, so after being used, cleaned, take it back to the range, hopefully it starts to be a little more tolerant of the regular ammo you find at ranges. Other than that, really have nothing negative to say about it. But overall, the ergonomic improvements make it relatively comfortable to hold. You get a full 3-finger grip. If you've got a larger hand, you're still going to have a 3-finger grip with the magazine extension. That grip safety goes away very, very easy, very, very light, and you're well up under the slide, so you're not going to get slide bit by it. Ergonomically, it works. It does, again, what it's supposed to do. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Player, Rumble. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you.